Okay, so here we go with part two of the Vince plates. So yeah, let's pick up where I left off. So let's get straight to it. Okay, guys. So I hit a little bit of a snag, and let's go through it real quick. So on the first plate that I did, which is the left front, this one was pretty much straightforward. Not really that hard at all. Once I got it up there using the plate method, that's what I got. I got a nice little plate. Anybody probably know this may look familiar. It's part of another plate. And then I got my washer and then my actual wheel stud. So putting in its place, I got this one kind of in right where it needs to be. Was able to kind of like hammer it down and be able to get the contour a little bit better as I started putting these the screws through it, because I want to end up doing it so that way the plate is formed completely, and that way it's going to be so much more easier when I install the rivets themselves. So I'm working my way from like if I'm doing the epoxy from the center, working my way out. So this one came out okay. This one right here though, this one I did break one drill bit, and I broke it here on this bolt right here. All right, so again, installed it with my plate method. You might be able to see where I'm going with this. I was able to get it in place, get all my edges nicely and tight, and then of course there are some areas where I had to kind of bang to be able to get my drill and the hole drilled, and then my screw in place. Again, work from the center on the way out. All right, so when I took my plate out, I could see that this hole was a little bit more off center than the front one. Okay, but I was able to get everything done. That was my only issue, with breaking that drill bit here. So let's take a look at the left rear. That was my problem child. Okay, so here we are on the right rear plate. Okay, so this was the one that was my problem child. The first two were not so bad. But this one was a little bit more of a pain. And let me explain on what I think is happening and what I may do for the next one. So by using these plates, gets a nice good seal on the bottom, gets it nice and flat. But what this plate doesn't do is it doesn't center this plate in the center of the actual hole that's already on the chassis itself. What is going on is there's this plate. You know, this plate that's in there that has the insert for the screw to go through. On the leading edges of the plate itself, it contours up a tad bit to give it more strength. So I'm assuming that's what I'm drilling into, is going to be the edge that comes upwards like this. I'm drilling into that section there. So what I had to do is adjust it a little bit, loosen it, hammer it down, and get it to go in there past that one section, still using the plate. And that's where I think it's probably best to try to utilize this to go up here and to use the cone shape part of the cone of the stud, sorry, to center this better. Now when you do that, this thing is going to be much more off. So there's going to be a lot more banging and a lot more straightening to get it to form better. But I think it's going to end up being better this way, to do it without the washer and the plate. As I stated before, this is the first time me doing it, so this is a learning process for me. But I think that's what's going to work best, and I probably won't know 100% sure unless I do another one of these, and then I just go and stick with the actual stud method. So if you use the stud, it's going to position that better, which is going to help you position these screws. I have one more plate left, so let's take a look at that plate real quick. Okay, so there, the last one is completely done. This is the front right, so this one is done. As you can see, the hole itself on the plates are much more center than the rear right. So yeah, so the only thing I'm going to have to do is on this side here, this flip on this one, as you can see, I've already marked it in black marker, is it sticks too far out. So what I got to do is when I take it off, go ahead and tap that in so it sits much more closer to the chassis itself. This is one good way to do it this way. That way you can go back and tweak any of the stuff that needs to be done. Now, also, since I'm already here and all the plates are in place, I went through and marked in the areas that I still need to remove paint or seam sealer, so that way it is bare metal, so when I start to etch and get it roughed up on both on the back of the plates and on the chassis itself, so that way start applying some epoxy. So yeah, let's take a look real quick on the rear one. So on the rear one, we have the little pieces that we had to put in there. I don't think I mentioned earlier, but what I ended up using, I just used tape to hold it in place, and then I drilled my spot and I had that sucker stay in there. So yeah, so as you can see right here, you can't see it very well. Yeah, there's still seam sealer there, so that's where I got to clean that up and get more bare metal. But yeah, so right now I am going to tweak pretty much all of these plates where they need a little bit more clearance to be bent a tad bit more, and also clean the surface of the chassis itself and get ready for the epoxy. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so the next step is going in and scuffing or getting the plates where the epoxy is going to be attaching to it. So Vince says to use one of these little wheels and scuff it through that way. Then this is it take too much time. So the whole key is you got to make it rough. It has to be rough so that it can adhere. It's just like sanding a car. You're not going to get paint to stick if if it's not scuffed up or sanded down. So same scenario here. The rougher it is, the better it's going to stick to the epoxy. So that was the whole key. So I'm going to be using the sand discs. This is a 36 grit is what I'm using, and what I'm going to go through is I'm going to go through the whole entire thing, clean off, get all the shininess, and then do what he kind of says is go in and make new marks so it looks like this. So you can see it's all completely grinded down, and it is rough, and this was going to adhere to that epoxy super bueno. Now do not use one of these. Well, I suggest not to do one of these because this is it is a scuffing pad, but it's more of a buffing pad, so it's going to leave a shinier surface. You want to use something with grit. Like I said, this is 36 grit. So I'm going to do one real quick, and then I'm going to jump and do the chassis as well. I did go back and clean my other areas to make sure that all the epoxy is gone. And in the interim, while I get these all scuffed up, there are the sections that I need to cut and trim, so I'll be doing that as well. So yeah, pick it up hopefully here when we start applying some epoxy. Make sure when you do these, you mark them when you take them off. So I marked mine when I took them off. You can see arrow for up and C for chassis. So that one goes on that side. And I did the same thing with the other one as well. So yeah, so now it's just a little bit more prep work on the chassis itself. I already done the grinding, but we got to clean all that mess off, and we're going to clean it with a brake cleaner, get everything ready, and should be epoxy time. So yeah, let's get with it. Now when I went back and blew it again, I concentrated more on the lines and on the hose, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that these were dry, that there is no brake cleaner in between or left behind. So that's why I went back and made sure and blew air, mainly more on the cracks, but mainly, just in all the hose. That way it is completely dry when I go apply the epoxy. Now I've already gone through and trimmed the plates themselves, and also scuffed the outside with the like a buff pad type deal, like a scuff pad. I went ahead and did that, so that way they're outside, it's easier to do. So when I apply epoxy, so at this point it's time to start applying some epoxy. All right, so I have everything assembled here. I got my plates, the little pieces for the cross member, and the little spacers. Everything's been cleaned, like I stated before. I got my rivets, I got my epoxy, I got my brushes, and the actual nozzles for the epoxy. And probably one of the best tools right now at this point is going to be an actual electric rivet gun. There's a lot of rivets to do, especially when doing the vent bar. So this is a plus right here. So yeah, so I think I got everything all squared away. Like I said, I have everything pretty much assembled. I got my my additional adhesive over there with my extra nozzles, and also just you got to be prepared. I got my wrench and also got my bolts for these pieces here. That way I don't have to go running around and looking for anything. So as of right now, I think I have everything ready, assembled, or ready to be assembled, and that way there should be no interference and no like, oh, where's this at? So yeah, so now let's get time to the epoxy. All right, so I got my epoxy on both sides. These little pieces are a little bit of a pain. And here are my bolts. All right, and don't know if you were able to tell real quick, but you can see that the actual epoxy is coming from around the edges, and that's what we want. And it is messy. I hope you guys have gloves, but let me go ahead and clean that up and make sure that it's nice and sealed. Got to make sure that it's nice and sealed. So just a little. Okay, so as you can see, I was able to put all the rivets in without compressing or without snapping them off or anything of that sort. So that's one of the key things to originally when I first started, is using the self tappers to get them into place and form it. So it made it so much more easier to attach the actual rivets themselves. So now it's going to be time to start actually popping them off. And remember, you want to start from the center, work your way out, and just to make sure you keep an eye on the epoxy that it starts to spread out and come out around the edges. Anyways, I will go back and add a little bit more and make sure that I do have epoxy coming through. So let's get to it. Well, I'm not gonna lie, that was a little easy and a little fun. God, sometimes power tools, they're so awesome to have. So yeah, so now I'm just gonna go around, clean everything up, add any epoxy in certain areas, and then this plate is completely installed. Make sure you go back through the epoxy and clean everything up. I did have some coming up through the hole, which I just cleaned up. And also, I didn't show I did the rivets in the back, but I did do the rivets in the back. And also, I added more epoxy on the lip back there because there wasn't enough that I applied on there to where it squeeze out. So what I ended up doing is I put the gun in there and I squeezed it, and then I went over it with my paintbrush here just to make sure I get it all in there. And there's no issues with any water or anything of that sort, and that way it lasts forever and ever. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of the install. That's pretty much simple. It's a little bit of a mess. That's the part that, in my opinion, it just dislike, but seems to be working good if you have a power tooled rivet gun. All right, so they're all installed, riveted, epoxied, and gone through and cleaned them back up. So let's take a quick peek at them. Okay, so here we are with the left front. Got that one all riveted in and epoxied, and all the edges nicely cleaned up to make sure it's a nice, very clean seal all the way around. And in the back itself, looks a little bit more messier, but there's nothing I can do about that part. One of the key things that you want to make sure is the epoxy coming from the hole itself. You want to make sure that's clean and there's not too much of epoxy hanging, because that's where the bushing will go. There's the two center ones for the cross member, and this is the right front. So this one is all the way around. I did add a little bit more on some sections just to make sure I had a nice, good, clean seal. And then I did an additional amount here on the lip, and I covered over the front just to make sure it gives more strength to the actual plate itself right there in that one section. And then we go back to the right rear. The right rear, that one was a little bit more of a messy one. I'll explain to you here in a second. And then we go to the last one, which is the left rear. Also have your brush readily available so that you can clean up the mess. And then when you see something, when you see the epoxy starting to drip down, that will help out. I have 6 of the epoxy containers, but all I end up using for the rear subframe itself was 3 of them. And let me grab that real quick for you. Okay, I take that back. What I really used was 2.5 is what I used. So I have total of 3. So technically, if you have 3 of these little small containers, that should do the undercarriage itself. The other remaining 3 are for the Vince bar that's going to be installed on this car as well. So that's why I have a total of 6. But 3 should get you by. And like I stated, I did add a good amount on one of those just to make sure I had good coverage. And you really don't have to. I actually left a lot of epoxy on the brush and on the floor and on the table itself. So yeah, so at this point, this one is done. These are not 100% completed. I still have seam sealer, I still have etching primer. They're going to be covered, and then we're going to go through the whole stuff. So if you've seen some of my videos, on previous videos on the installation of the plates themselves, you can see I go a little bit more further than what we've got right here. So, but mainly what I wanted to do is just cover the installation portion of the Vince Skinz. So I hope this all helps out. Like always, guys, please help the channel out, and by doing so, you must hit the like button and subscribe. I like to keep these things going. I know there's been a little bit of a window of haven't done anything, but I've just been super swamped, as I mentioned before, and just have not had a chance to do some videos. And I'm starting to get to the point where I'm catching up, where I can do the videos. Now, the video is probably going to take a while for me to edit it and put it up there, but soon I'd get it up, because I do have another video that I've already done, and I haven't yet even touched the editing. So it's just a matter of me working and try to get all this done and get this content out to you guys.